Welcome. My YouTube channel, let's go. Life is often a cruel joke played by the universe, dressed up as routine, commitment, and unconditional love. For 30 years, my life was a carefully constructed mosaic of self-denial and relentless grinding effort, all for one single brilliant piece of glass: the farm. When people looked at me, Eleanor Vance, a woman nearing 60 with faded clothes, hands perpetually stained with soil from the small garden I maintained, and a face lined more by worry than laughter, they saw a simple, aging wife. They saw what Robert, my husband, had allowed them to see. They saw the supporting character in his ambitious drama. But they didn't see the ledger in my mind, the mental spreadsheet where every single penny, every extra shift, every sacrifice was meticulously accounted for. They didn't see the nights I went to bed hungry because I had to meet a quarterly savings goal. They didn't see the beautiful, vibrant woman who had vanished years ago, replaced by a ghost fueled by nothing but a promise. Robert's promise. Robert had a dream, a consuming, tangible desire that had been the cornerstone of our marriage since the day we met. It wasn't fame or wealth in a city skyscraper. It was the land. A sprawling, 50-acre farm with a creek running through the back, an old red barn, and enough space to breathe the kind of air that only comes from deep connection to the earth. He called it Vance Homestead. He spoke about it with a reverence he never quite managed for me. We were barely 20 when he first took me to see the property, which was then owned by the elderly Mr. Henderson. It was late autumn, and the air smelled of damp leaves and wood smoke. Robert stood by the rusty gate, his young face alight with a passion that took my breath away. "Ellie," he'd whispered, pulling me close. "Look at it. This is where we'll raise our children. This is where we'll grow old. I'll teach you to drive the tractor, and you'll keep the best garden in the county. This is our life, my love." That word, love, clung to me like perfume, intoxicating and permanent. In that moment, the dream became mine too. Not because I inherently craved farming, but because I craved his happiness. I craved being the one who delivered that happiness. Robert was a skilled carpenter, quick with his hands and respected in his trade. But he was also a spender, a man who lived purely in the present moment, oblivious to the concept of compound interest or long-term financial planning. He believed that if you worked hard today, tomorrow would simply take care of itself. I, however, was the anchor, a quiet, disciplined force that understood that big dreams require big discipline. So, the saving began. It started small. I took a job as a bookkeeper at the local hardware store, working 10 hours a day, 6 days a week. Robert's paycheck covered the essentials: the tiny rented house, the utility bills, his truck payments. My paycheck, almost every cent of it, went straight into the savings account, labeled ominously in my mind, Homestead Fund. I never bought new clothes. My coats were always second-hand, my shoes repaired until the soles thinned past recognition. When the neighbors spoke excitedly about their summer vacations, I'd just smile and say Robert and I preferred staycations. We didn't even have a television for the first 15 years. The electricity it consumed felt like an unforgivable extravagance. Every time Robert suggested a dinner out to celebrate an anniversary, I gently steered him back home, cooking a simple but loving meal, reminding him, "We'll celebrate properly, darling, once we have the farm. The big one." Robert, to his credit, was always grateful. He'd hug me tight and call me his little warrior. Sometimes, when he saw me exhausted, hunched over the store accounts, late into the night, he'd protest. "Ellie, you're killing yourself. Let's slow down. We'll get the farm eventually." "No, Robert," I'd reply. kissing his tired cheek. We get it now. We get it while we still have the strength to work the land. Don't you worry about me. Knowing I'm making your deepest dream come true, that's my fuel. And it was. The thought of that farm, of Robert standing proudly on his own soil, was the only thing that kept me going through the crushing loneliness and the constant, dull ache of sacrifice. Years turned into decades. The Henderson property went up for sale twice, and twice we had to let it go because we were still short. Each time, Robert's disappointment was a palpable, heavy thing that settled over the house. He'd slump in his armchair, a man defeated by circumstance. It was during these moments that I doubled my efforts, taking on cleaning jobs after my bookkeeping shift. I became an expert at stretching a dollar until it screamed. When our daughter Clara was born, the fund grew slightly slower, but the motivation intensified. I imagined Clara running barefoot through the tall grass, Robert teaching her to milk the cows, a perfect, picturesque family life born from my tireless dedication. Clara, however, grew up resenting the homestead fund. "Mom," she'd complain as a teenager, pointing at her threadbare school backpack. "Everyone else has the new model. Why are we so poor? Dad makes good money." "We're not poor, sweetheart," I'd tell her, my voice gentle but firm. "We are investing in a future, a grand future on a beautiful farm. It's a temporary sacrifice." "It doesn't feel temporary," she'd scoff, rolling her eyes. "It feels like you love that stupid piece of land more than you love a comfortable life now." Her words stung, but I dismissed them as teenage petulance. She just didn't understand the grand vision. She didn't understand the depth of her father's dream, or the quiet strength of my love. Then came the year, 29 years into our marriage, when the Henderson property came back on the market. Mr. Henderson had passed away, and his children wanted a quick sale. The asking price was high, higher than the previous 2 times. But this time, when I pulled up the balance on the homestead fund, the numbers swam before my eyes. We had enough. More than enough. The feeling was transcendent. It wasn't relief. It was a cosmic release. I had done it. I, Eleanor Vance, the simple bookkeeper and relentless saver, had single-handedly built Robert Vance's dream, brick by financial brick. I kept it a secret. I wanted the reveal to be perfect, cinematic. I arranged the purchase quietly, handling all the legal work, using the money I had guarded like a dragon's treasure. I had the lawyer draw up the deeds in Robert's name alone, just as he had always wanted. This wasn't my dream. It was his. I was merely the architect of its manifestation. The closing date was set for a Tuesday. I booked the day off work, something I rarely did. I prepared Robert's favorite meal, slow-cooked pot roast, buttery mashed potatoes, and the apple pie he swore was better than his mother's. I even splurged on a new modest dress, a pretty floral print that reminded me of my younger self. When Robert came home that evening, tired and smelling of sawdust and sweat, I was waiting. The house was clean, the table set beautifully, and a single, perfectly wrapped box sat beside his dinner plate. "What's all this, Ellie?" he asked, shedding his jacket. He looked tired, perhaps a little distracted. Lately, he often seemed preoccupied, tapping messages on his phone and staying out late on big jobs. But I had put it down to the stress of his work. "Tonight," I said, walking towards him, my heart pounding a rhythm that vibrated through my whole body. "We celebrate the end of an era, Robert, and the beginning of a far better one." He looked confused, but pleased. He sat down and picked up the small box. "A new tool?" he chuckled, pulling at the ribbon. "Better than any tool, my darling," I breathed, pulling out my chair. "It's freedom, He opened the box. Inside, resting on a velvet cushion I had borrowed from Clara's jewelry box, was a thick stack of papers, neatly bound and stamped with the official seal of the county recorder. The deed was on top. The legal description, the acreage, the parcel number, and right there, in bold, formal script, owner, Robert A. Vance. Below that, the name of the property, Vance Homestead. Robert's hand trembled as he picked up the papers. His eyes scanned the first page, then the second. A slow, disbelieving flush spread across his face, wiping away the fatigue. It was the face of the young man at the rusty gate, 29 years younger, staring at his destiny. He looked up at me and his eyes were glistening. Ellie. His voice was a raw whisper, thick with emotion. How? The price. It was impossible. I reached across the table and took his hand, calloused from his honest labor. Nothing is impossible for us, Robert. Not when we work together. I closed on it this morning. It's ours, it's yours. Tears finally welled up in his eyes, but they were tears of pure joy, the validation of a life spent in quiet sacrifice. He stood up abruptly, pulling me into a fierce, suffocating embrace that lifted me slightly off the floor. You did this. He murmured into my hair. 30 years, Ellie. You did this for me. You are the most incredible woman alive. I owe you everything. I squeezed him back, finally letting the decades of stress fall away. This was it. The moment I had lived for. The debt was paid. The dream was real. You owe me nothing, Robert, I whispered, pulling back just enough to look into his eyes. Only your happiness. Now let's eat. The farmer needs his strength. We sat down, and the meal was the best we had ever shared. We talked about plans, the new fence, planting corn this spring, maybe getting a few chickens. Robert was alive again, invigorated. He held the deeds in his lap, touching the paper like it was solid gold. After dinner, we settled on the old, worn sofa. Robert still held the deeds. He looked at them one last time, his expression complex, a strange mix of triumph and something else I couldn't quite decipher. You know, Ellie, he said, his voice calmer now, almost too casual. This is a huge responsibility. A farm like this, it needs more than just a dedicated owner. It needs the right kind of support, the right kind of person to run the books, handle the administration, make sure the operation is profitable. I felt a slight chill, but I dismissed it as nerves. Well, who better than me? I handled the accounts for the hardware store for 20 years, and I managed to fund the purchase of the whole thing. I'm pretty good with a ledger, Robert. I laughed lightly, expecting him to join in. He didn't. He just stared at the parchment, tracing the border with his thumb. Yes, you are, Ellie. You are excellent with a ledger, and you've done an impossible thing for me, and I will be grateful to you for the rest of my life. Thank you. It was a beautiful, heartfelt thank you. The sound of years of effort, finally acknowledged. I closed my eyes for a brief moment, savoring the sound. Then the doorbell rang. It was an unexpected interruption, but Robert didn't seem surprised. He just sighed, a slow, deep exhalation that seemed to carry all the air out of the room. I asked her to come over tonight, he said quietly, placing the deeds gently on the coffee table. I wanted her to be here for the celebration. Her? I asked, a tiny, cold knot beginning to twist in my stomach. Who is her, Robert? He rose and walked to the front door, pulling it open. Standing on our porch was a woman I vaguely recognized, Shelby from the county planning office. She was younger than me, perhaps 40, impeccably dressed, with bright, intelligent eyes and a confident smile. I had dealt with her over the phone a few times while secretly finalizing the farm purchase. Shelby, come in, Robert said, stepping aside. Shelby walked past Robert, her eyes immediately finding the table, the deeds, and the celebratory dinner remnants. She didn't look at me, Eleanor, the wife who had bought the farm. She looked straight at Robert, and her smile broadened, full of intimate understanding. Robert, darling, you did it. I knew you could. Darling. The blood rushed out of my face. The room suddenly felt very far away. Robert closed the door and returned to the living room, standing beside the coffee table, an awkward sentinel between the two women. Ellie, he began, his voice flat, devoid of the warmth it had held just moments ago. This is Shelby. You've spoken on the phone. Shelby is. She's been instrumental in helping me manage the business side of my carpentry firm these last 2 years. She's brilliant with investment strategy, land use, and, well, everything that involves the future. He paused. My stomach was churning, but my eyes were fixed on the woman who was looking at me now, finally, with a look that wasn't malicious, but utterly pitying. Shelby and I, Robert continued, unable to meet my gaze, focusing instead on the patterned rug. We've fallen in love. The words hung in the air, heavy and poisonous. Fallen in love, a simple phrase, yet it detonated the foundation of my life, built over 3 decades of sweat and sacrifice. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. My reaction was a terrible, deep stillness, the kind of silence that precedes a cataclysm. I see, I managed, my voice sounding like broken glass. I looked at the deeds lying innocently on the table, the proof of my devotion. But what does that have to do with tonight, Robert? I asked, forcing the question out. This is about the farm I bought you. Robert finally looked at me, and his eyes held not love or even guilt, but a weary resolve. It has everything to do with it, Eleanor. Shelby and I are planning our future together. She shares the vision for the farm completely. She's already drawn up business plans for sustainable farming, agritourism, things I never would have thought of. She's not just a bookkeeper, Ellie. She's a partner, the right kind of partner for this dream. Then the unthinkable happened. Robert picked up the stack of deeds from the coffee table. The property documents purchased with the tears, hunger, and labor of my entire adult life. He held them out toward Shelby. Shelby didn't hesitate. She reached out and took the papers from his hand. "Thank you, Robert," she said, her voice smooth and confident. And for the first time, I heard a ring of ownership, a claim I knew I could never match. "I promise you, we will make this the most successful homestead in the state." Our homestead. Robert watched her accept the gift of my life's work, and then he turned back to me, Eleanor, his wife of nearly 30 years, the woman who had delivered his dream to his doorstep. "Thank you, Ellie," he said again, repeating the word he had used minutes earlier, but now it was hollow, a dismissal rather than gratitude. "I couldn't have done this without you. You were essential in getting the capital." I stared at the two of them, Robert, standing free of his past, and Shelby, holding the future I had paid for. The silence stretched, a vast, echoing canyon of betrayal. I finally spoke, and when I did, my voice was dangerously quiet, the sound of a woman whose heart has just been shattered into a million irrevocable pieces. "Essential in getting the capital," I repeated slowly, letting the phrase sink into the ruins of my self-respect. "Is that what I was, Robert? A bank account with a pulse? A 30-year savings plan?" Robert shifted uncomfortably. "Don't be dramatic, Eleanor. I care about you. I always will. But this is the only way forward for the farm, for my life. We can discuss the arrangements for the house later. I'll make sure you're taken care of." Taken care of? A cold, strange clarity washed over me. a terrifying calm. I didn't feel the need to scream anymore. I just felt the need to survive. I walked slowly to the table, picked up the empty, crumpled wrapping paper that had held the deeds, and smoothed it out. "There won't be any arrangements to discuss, Robert," I said, looking not at him, but at the reflection of my hollow eyes in the polished wood of the table. "Because you didn't just thank me and give the deeds to her tonight. You gave her my life savings. The money I sweated for, denied myself for, the future I thought was ours. You bought the farm, Robert, but you just paid for it with my existence." I looked at Shelby, who suddenly seemed less confident, perhaps noticing the chilling intensity in my eyes. "Enjoy the view, Shelby," I said softly. "You're standing on 30 years of my deferred happiness. But don't worry, the account is empty. There's nothing left for you to take." I straightened up, turning away from the couple, turning away from the wreckage of my marriage. I had to leave. I had to breathe air that didn't taste of lies and sawdust. I walked into the small hallway, grabbing the worn coat I had bought 20 years ago from a yard sale. "Where are you going, Eleanor?" Robert called, finally sounding worried. I paused at the door. I turned back one last time, meeting his eyes and allowing him to see the profound emptiness in mine. "I'm going to start saving, Robert," I said, a faint, chilling smile touching my lips. "Because it seems I have to buy my own life back now. And this time, I won't be saving for your dream. I'll be saving for my revenge." I opened the door and walked out into the cold night, leaving Robert and the woman he secretly loved standing in the glow of the kitchen, bathed in the light of the dream I had killed myself to deliver. The farm was bought, but the real payment had just begun, and they had no idea what the final price would be. The night air was a shock, a cold, unfeeling slap against my face. It was mid-October, and the scent of the first hard frost was already in the wind, sharp and unforgiving. I walked away from the little house, the house that had been our rental, the only home Robert and I had ever shared, and I didn't look back. There was nothing left there for me to see. The image I carried was indelible. Robert and Shelby, standing together, holding the deed to the farm, holding the deed to my lost life. I had nothing but the clothes on my back and the old worn coat. No purse, no phone, no plan. 30 years of disciplined savings, meticulous planning, and utter self-sacrifice had been channeled into one spectacular, devastating failure. I had built a magnificent future, only to deliver it, wrapped in a bow, to my husband's mistress. My feet carried me aimlessly, pounding the familiar pavement of our suburban street. I passed the hardware store, where I had spent countless hours balancing ledgers, calculating inventory, and skimming every possible bonus or raise into the homestead fund. I passed the corner market, where I had haggled over the price of bruised apples, knowing that 5 cents saved was 5 cents closer to Robert's dream. Every landmark was a monument to my folly, a cruel reminder of the trust I had placed in a man who saw me as an instrument rather than a partner. Essential in getting the capital. Robert's dismissive phrase echoed in my mind, a chilling confirmation of my expendability. I wasn't his love. I was his unsecured loan. I walked for what felt like hours, the anger finally giving way to a bone-deep chill that was more emotional than physical. I needed a plan. I needed shelter. I certainly couldn't go back. My only option, the only person I felt I could rely on, who wouldn't immediately call Robert or demand tearful explanations, was Clara, our daughter. Clara, now 26, lived in an apartment downtown, working as a graphic designer. Our relationship, always strained by my single-minded devotion to saving, was polite but distant. She often accused me of being a martyr, of prioritizing the mythical farm over her childhood comfort. Now, ironically, her apartment was the only place left for the martyr to go. I found a public phone booth, a rarity these days, and fumbled with the few coins I found in my coat pocket. I dialed her number. She answered on the second ring, her voice crisp and slightly annoyed. "Hello?" she said. "Clara," I said, my voice hoarse from the cold and the suppressed shock. "Mom, it's almost midnight. Is everything okay? Did Dad send you to ask about that insurance policy again?" The casual mention of Robert and his business affairs, the assumption that I was merely his messenger, twisted the knife. "No, honey. It's just me. I need your help. I'm near the bus depot downtown. I need a place to stay tonight." A long silence stretched across the line. Then, Clara's voice softened slightly, laced with hesitant concern. "Mom, what happened? Did you and Dad have a fight?" "It wasn't a fight, Clara. It was an ending. A very long one. I can't explain right now. Please, can you just come get me? I have nowhere else to go." Clara sighed, the sound of a weary adult dealing with unexpected parental drama. "Fine, Mom. Stay right there. Don't move. I'll be 20 minutes. She arrived in her small, battered car, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock and irritation when she saw me standing alone under the harsh yellow streetlights. "Mom, you look terrible," she said, pulling me into the warmth of the car. "What is going on? Did you finally sell the house?" "No, we just rented it, remember? And no, I didn't sell anything." I paused, staring straight ahead as she merged onto the main road. "Clara, I bought the farm today. The Henderson property. I gave the deeds to your father." Clara stopped at a red light and turned to me, a look of genuine disbelief on her face. "You bought it? After all these years? Mom, that's huge. Why are you downtown then? Why aren't you celebrating with him?" I took a deep, shuddering breath, the first real vulnerability I had allowed myself all night. Because when I gave him the deeds, Clara, he handed them to his girlfriend. The car behind us honked, and Clara, forgetting the light had turned green, slowly pressed the accelerator. She drove in stunned silence for a minute, then pulled over to the curb. She turned off the engine and looked at me, her face pale. He handed them to his girlfriend. His girlfriend? Dad has a girlfriend? For how long? I don't know, honey. Maybe 2 years. A woman named Shelby from the county planning office. He said they were in love. He said I was essential in getting the capital. He handed her the deeds to Vance Homestead, the farm I bought with my life. Clara didn't offer comfort. She didn't hug me. Instead, a strange, cold fury hardened her features. It wasn't directed entirely at Robert. It was directed at the situation, at the monumental chaos I had brought into her predictable life. "Oh, Mom," she said, shaking her head, "I always told you. I told you that obsessive saving, that tunnel vision for a place instead of a person, was going to end badly. He didn't see you, Mom. He saw the money. And now you're 60 years old. You've sacrificed everything, and you're homeless." Her words were harsh, brutal, but they were the truth. They cut through the shock and hit the core of my failure. I was homeless, financially destitute, and adrift, all because I believed in a promise more than I believed in my own worth. "You're right, Clara," I whispered, the admission a quiet surrender. "You were right all along." That was enough for her. The moment I conceded my mistake, her anger softened into grudging support. She started the car. "All right, we'll figure it out. You can stay on the sofa tonight. But tomorrow, we make a plan. We figure out how to get you a lawyer, how to get some of that money back." I shook my head. "No, Clara. There's no money left. It's all in the farm. Robert's name is the only one on the deed. It was my gift to him. A gift I can't take back. Then we go after him for divorce. For alimony, for the 30 years of shared equity," she insisted. "I will get a divorce," I confirmed, my voice gaining a steely edge. "But I don't want his alimony, Clara. I don't want his money, and I don't want a penny of that farm. I told him tonight that I wouldn't be saving for his dream anymore. I'm saving for my revenge. And revenge is best served cold, without the messy paperwork of a messy divorce settlement." Clara looked at me again, truly looked at me this time, recognizing the cold fire that had replaced the broken woman she had seen earlier. She saw the same relentless determination that had allowed me to save every penny for 3 decades, now redirected and aimed with lethal focus. "Revenge?" she asked slowly. "What kind of revenge, Mom?" "The kind that doesn't involve lawyers and courts, Clara. The kind that destroys his entire foundation. Robert believes I am broken, that I have nothing left. He believes he is safe on his farm, holding the deeds I bought him. I will show him he's wrong. I want him to lose the farm, not to me, but to his own choices. And I want Shelby to be right there to witness it." Clara drove the rest of the way in silence, processing the magnitude of my declared war. Clara's apartment was small but clean, filled with the scattered chaos of a creative young professional. The next morning, I was up before dawn. I found a notebook and a pen in her desk and started working. My first priority wasn't a lawyer, it was money. I needed to establish an income stream immediately. A second, secret homestead fund, this time solely for Eleanor. I called the owner of the hardware store, Mr. Peterson. He was shocked to hear from me at 6:30 a.m., but he knew my work ethic. "Eleanor, what in the world? You usually don't call until the store opens at 8. Mr. Peterson, I need my job back. Full-time, salary, benefits, everything." "But Robert told me yesterday, he said you were retiring, that you and he finally bought the farm and you were moving out there immediately to manage the books for the new business." My fingers tightened around the phone. Robert hadn't just betrayed me. He had preemptively cut my professional ties to ensure I was truly adrift. He had sealed my fate, not realizing that he was merely delaying the inevitable. "Robert was mistaken, Mr. Peterson. There's been a change in plans. I am not retiring. In fact, I need to work more than ever. I need a place to stay, and I need an income." I heard the sound of a match striking and the light click of a lighter. Mr. Peterson was having his morning cigarette. "Look, Eleanor, I told Robert I'd have to find a replacement immediately. I already put an ad out. But you're the best bookkeeper I ever had. Let me think. Can you come in today, say 9 a.m.? We'll discuss options." "I'll be there, Mr. Peterson. And thank you." I'll hung up, a small sliver of hope cutting through the despair. When Clara woke up, I was already dressed in one of her borrowed blouses, far too trendy for me, but clean, and had coffee waiting. "Morning," she mumbled, rubbing her eyes. "Did you sleep?" "Hardly, but I've been working." I laid the notebook open on the kitchen counter. It wasn't full of divorce notes. It was a complex financial analysis. "Look, Clara, I'm going back to the hardware store for a meeting. But that's not enough. I need to maximize my earnings. Robert had $300,000 in equity in that farm purchase, the value of the land alone. He thinks he's ruined me. He thinks I'll take a measly settlement and disappear. I will make $300,000 back, and I will use it to finance his downfall." Clara stared at the notebook, which was divided into columns titled Source of Income, Target Goal, and Action Plan. "How are you going to make that kind of money, Mom? Working at a hardware store?" "No, I'm an expert in maximizing profit and minimizing expenditure. That's what I did for 30 years. I am also an expert in carpentry accounting. I know every supplier, every contractor, every subcontractor, and every bid Robert has placed in the last 15 years. And I know every weakness in his business model." "Wait, Mom, are you talking about sabotage?" "No, not sabotage. Market correction." I corrected firmly. "Robert Vance Carpentry and Contracting has been running on the thinnest of margins because Robert is terrible at pricing labor, bad at inventory control, and excellent at hiding poor financial decisions from me. I, however, know where the bones are buried. I am going to find a competitor, the biggest, hungriest competitor in the area, and I am going to sell them Robert's insider knowledge. I won't break the law. I will simply sell my expertise and historical data to the highest bidder." Clara looked horrified, then strangely proud. "Mom, that's genius, and terrifying." "It's just business, Clara. Robert taught me that. When I was buying the farm, I was just capital. Now my 30 years of capital is for sale, and the highest bidder wins the market share." The meeting with Mr. Peterson was tense but productive. He couldn't give me the full-time bookkeeper role immediately because he had promised it to a younger man. But he offered me a significant raise to work part-time in the mornings as a consultant, helping transition the accounts and identify old losses. "It's not enough, Eleanor," he said sympathetically. "I know how much you need stability right now." "It's a start, Mr. Peterson, and thank you. Just one more thing." I leaned forward across his cluttered desk. "I need an introduction. Who is Robert Vance's biggest, most effective competitor?" "The one who is desperate to break his monopoly on the high-end custom home market." Mr. Peterson squinted at me, taken aback by my ruthless query. "That would be Archibald Sterling, Eleanor. Sterling Builders. He's cutthroat, mean, but he's good. Why do you ask?" "I need to meet him, Mr. Peterson. Tell him I have a business proposition that will change the landscape of the local contracting market forever. A proposition he can't refuse." Peterson looked at my quiet intensity, then at my worn, threadbare clothes, and finally at the unwavering determination in my eyes. He nodded slowly. "I'll make the call, Eleanor. But be careful. Archie Sterling eats people like us for breakfast. Then he's about to find out that this breakfast comes with a 30-year seasoning," I said, a cold smile touching my lips. That afternoon, I met Archibald Sterling in his immaculate, glass-walled office. He was a tall, imposing man in his late 50s, dressed in a sharp suit, radiating aggressive ambition. He didn't offer me coffee or pleasantries. He just gestured to a chair and said, "Peterson says you have information regarding Robert Vance's business. Get to the point. Time is money." I didn't take offense. His directness appealed to the new, hardened Eleanor. "Mr. Sterling," I began, placing my small notebook on his large mahogany desk. "For the last 30 years, I have been the silent, unpaid Chief Financial Officer of Robert Vance Carpentry and Contracting. I wrote every expense report, calculated every bid, and managed every supplier account. I know his true labor costs, his deepest debts, his most reliable suppliers, and the exact minimum bid he needs to win any job without raising suspicion." Sterling raised an eyebrow, a flicker of interest, finally, in his eyes. "And why are you selling this information to me? Is Robert late on your salary?" I leaned forward, my gaze locking onto his. "He's not late on my salary. He just bought his dream farm with my life savings and handed the deeds to his mistress. I am selling you the weakness in his empire, Mr. Sterling. The price for this 30 years of market intelligence is $300,000, paid in 2 installments, and a non-disclosure agreement that protects my identity. With this information, you can strategically underbid him on every major contract he pursues this quarter, leveraging his historical labor miscalculations and winning the market share he desperately needs to service the new loan he must have taken out for the farm's operating costs. Sterling sat back, steepling his fingers. He looked at me, a woman who looked like she should be baking cookies, and realized I was a financial predator in disguise. $300,000, he mused. That's a hefty price for gossip, Mrs. Vance. It's not gossip, Mr. Sterling. It's the blueprint for his corporate destruction. Robert Vance is vulnerable right now. He just invested his capital into a long-term, high-risk, low-liquidity asset, the farm. He will need every dollar of every contract he wins for the next 2 years to keep that farm afloat. If you starve his contract pipeline, he will default. He will lose the farm. And you will gain the entire custom contracting market. I slid the notebook closer to him. The first step is proving my value. Right here are the estimated labor costs for the upcoming Baines residence renovation, the largest contract on the books. Robert's likely bid is $780,000. My numbers show he can't go below $750,000 without hitting his true cost. You bid $749,500. You win the contract. You pay me the first $150,000. If I am wrong, you owe me nothing, and you keep my notes. Sterling stared at the numbers, then back at me. A slow, predatory grin spread across his face. You're a wicked woman, Eleanor Vance, he finally said. No, Mr. Sterling, I was a foolish woman. Now, I am a solvent one. Do we have a deal? He extended his hand. We have a deal. Welcome to the war, Mrs. Vance. I shook his hand, feeling the cold, hard contact of pure, transactional ruthlessness. It felt cleaner than Robert's false affection ever had. In the weeks that followed, my life became a clandestine operation run from Clara's tiny apartment. I worked mornings at the hardware store, managing Mr. Peterson's accounts and gathering more current data on Robert's material purchases. By afternoon, I was Mr. Sterling's consultant, dissecting Robert's bids and handing over the strategic weaknesses. The Baines contract was the first domino to fall. Sterling won the bid, precisely at the figure I had predicted. The first check for $150,000 hit a new secret account I opened, an account only in my maiden name, Eleanor Hayes. Robert called Clara relentlessly. He didn't call me. He called his daughter, asking where I was, acting bewildered, not contrite. He says he just wants to talk, Mom, Clara reported one evening, looking worried. He sounds genuinely confused. He said you were overreacting and that you misunderstood the situation. He didn't misunderstand anything, Clara. He understood it perfectly. He just thought I was too broken to fight back. Tell him I'm fine. Tell him I've started a new job. Don't tell him where. The second major contract, the new community center, also went to Sterling. Robert was furious. He called his suppliers, screaming about rising material costs and inexplicable losses. What he didn't realize was that I, Eleanor, had meticulously trained his only bookkeeper for 30 years, and that same bookkeeper was now feeding his competitor his Achilles heel. The second installment, another $150,000, landed in the Hayes account. In less than 2 months, I had the $300,000 I had set as my revenge goal. I was no longer destitute. I was financially armed. But financial ruin wasn't enough. I wanted Robert to feel the precise moment of loss, the complete collapse of his dream, just as I had. I needed to see the farm. I took a Saturday off and borrowed Clara's car. I drove to the outskirts of town, navigating the winding roads until I reached the familiar rusty gate. Vance Homestead. Robert and Shelby had been there for nearly 3 months. I parked a distance away and watched. The property was magnificent, even in the dead of winter. The old red barn had been freshly painted, and the house had new windows. There was a new, sleek, green tractor sitting beside the barn, a massive investment. Shelby's car, a pristine, white SUV, was parked neatly near the front porch. It was exactly the vision Robert had promised me, now fully realized, and I was the ghost looking in. I saw Shelby emerge from the house, dressed in designer denim and perfectly fitted farm boots, holding a clipboard. She was giving instructions to Robert, who was carrying a heavy bag of feed toward the small, newly fenced chicken coop. Robert looked older, his movements less sure, the burden of the farm already heavy on his shoulders. He was doing the physical labor, while Shelby was doing the management, the role I had been ready to take. I watched them for a long time. They looked like a couple. They were building their life on my ashes, but as I watched, I noticed something else. Robert's shoulders were slumped even when Shelby wasn't looking. There was a strain in his posture, a perpetual furrow in his brow that spoke not of satisfied achievement, but of overwhelming stress. Then, the final piece of my puzzle arrived. A black sedan pulled up the gravel driveway. A man in a sharp suit and hat emerged. I immediately recognized him. Mr. Davies, the loan officer from the bank. Davies was carrying a thick manila envelope, the kind that held serious, unnegotiable documents. He greeted Robert with a forced smile, but his handshake was stiff. Shelby joined them quickly, her clipboard held tight against her chest, her smile nervous. I couldn't hear the conversation, but I didn't need to. I knew the rhythm of financial distress intimately. Robert Vance Carpentry was losing contracts left and right, thanks to Sterling. Robert was likely bleeding cash to fund the farm's high startup costs, which I knew he hadn't planned for. He had purchased a multi-million-dollar asset with zero working capital, betting everything on the continued success of his carpentry business. And now, the business was faltering. Mr. Davies wouldn't be there to chat about the weather. He was there to discuss loan payments. I watched as Shelby animatedly spoke, pointing at her clipboard, arguing figures and projections. Robert stood, slightly behind her, quiet and defeated. Shelby was fighting for their dream, using her business expertise to try and save the very foundation I had paid for. But her fight was against facts, against the sudden and inexplicable disappearance of Robert's contract pipeline. After 20 minutes, Davies left, his expression unyielding. Shelby watched his car drive away, then turned and slammed her clipboard against the side of the house in a rare moment of frustration. Robert walked up to her and placed a comforting hand on her shoulder, but she shrugged him off. The true picture became clear. The farm was no longer Robert's dream. It was his crushing debt. The stress was ripping apart the new romance, fueled by financial strain and the loss of Robert's former success. I started the car and drove away, a deep, cold satisfaction settling in my chest. The revenge wasn't just about the $300,000. It was about ensuring that the moment they lost the farm, they would lose each other too. I had the capital. Now, it was time to deploy the final, devastating move. A move that would ensure that when the farm was finally foreclosed, Robert and Shelby would know exactly who was responsible for their ruin and why. I had a new dream now, fueled not by love, but by cold, quiet justice. I would ensure that the final, the most painful cost of Vance Homestead was paid not by me, but by the man who had traded his 30-year partner for a new, shiny asset. My next step had to be flawless. It had to be visible. It had to be the ultimate, undeniable, public humiliation. The final cost of the dream. My reconnaissance trip to Vance Homestead was not just to observe. It was to confirm the timetable. Robert and Shelby were already under severe financial strain. The bank's visit was the signal I needed. The period of quiet destruction was over. It was time for the public execution of the dream. I returned to Clara's apartment, the $300,000 sitting safely in my new account. The money now feeling less like capital and more like a weapon. "Clara," I said, waking her up late that Sunday night, "I need you to use your graphic design skills. I need you to create a perfect reproduction of the Vance Homestead deeds." Clara sat up, rubbing the sleep from her eyes. "Mom, you're scaring me." "Why? That's forgery, and what good is it anyway? Robert has the real ones." "Not forgery, honey. Replication. I need something identical in size, color, and font. The information must be exactly the same, down to the property description and the county recorder stamps. But one detail must be changed." I pulled out my notebook and pointed to a name. "I want you to change the name on the official deed from owner Robert A. Vance to owner Eleanor H. Vance, using my maiden name. Do not change anything else. Make it look perfectly authentic." Clara stared at me, her expression a mix of awe and deep concern. "Mom, what are you planning?" "I am planning a grand finale, Clara. Robert ruined my life in private. I will reclaim my dignity and deliver justice in public. The bank is going to foreclose soon. I need to make sure the entire county knows exactly who bought that farm and who betrayed the one who paid the price." The opportunity came 3 weeks later. Mr. Peterson, my former boss, was holding the annual county business gala. It was the biggest social event of the year, where all the major contractors, developers, and, most crucially, bank loan officers gathered. Robert Vance was typically the guest of honor, always boasting about his success. I ensured I was invited. I called Mr. Peterson and explained that I, Eleanor Vance, needed to attend to make an important personal announcement regarding my separation from Robert. My new friend, Archibald Sterling, was more than happy to sponsor my ticket. I didn't arrive with Robert. I arrived on the arm of a meticulously clean, well-dressed, and devastatingly successful Archibald Sterling, a sight that caused an immediate, palpable shift in the atmosphere. I was wearing a new dress, not the inexpensive floral one from that fateful night, but an elegant, deep blue gown that I had purchased specifically for this evening. The most expensive thing I had ever owned. I hadn't dressed up in 30 years. I wasn't just Eleanor Vance. I was Eleanor Hayes, a woman with $300,000 cash and a new sense of power. Robert and Shelby were already there. They looked strained, nervous, clinging to each other awkwardly. Robert saw me across the crowded room, recognized the man I was with, and his face drained of color. He knew, instantly, that I was responsible for his professional downfall. "Ellie," he started, moving toward me, his voice a low, desperate plea. "Mr. Vance," I cut him off. My voice steady, my smile cold. "I believe you're looking for an explanation for the loss of your recent contracts. Allow me to introduce my business partner, Mr. Archibald Sterling. He can fill you in on his competitive pricing model." Robert was speechless. He glanced from me to Sterling, the realization of my calculated revenge hitting him like a physical blow. You sold me out," he choked out, his dream of the farm crumbling around him. "I sold my expertise, Robert," I corrected softly. "The market intelligence I acquired over 30 years as your unpaid CFO. I was essential in getting the capital. Remember? I decided to invest that capital into a better future for myself." Before he could respond, I walked away, moving to the center of the room. The tension was electric. Everyone was watching. I took a glass of champagne from a passing waiter and tapped it gently with a small silver spoon. The ringing sound silenced the room. "Friends, business partners, ladies and gentlemen," I began, my voice clear and carrying, amplified by the high ceilings of the ballroom. "I am Eleanor Vance, and many of you know my husband, Robert Vance, who recently fulfilled his lifelong dream of purchasing Vance Homestead, the beautiful Henderson property." I paused, scanning the room, until my eyes landed directly on Mr. Davies, the bank loan officer, who was standing near the back, looking uncomfortable. "Robert, dear, and Shelby, his." "Ardner," I continued, gesturing to them. They were frozen in place, utterly exposed. "I want to offer a final formal acknowledgement of the gift I gave them, a gift I saved for and sacrificed for over 3 decades." I raised the glass, but instead of drinking, I reached into the elegant clutch purse I carried. I pulled out the document Clara had so brilliantly created, the replicated deed bearing the name Eleanor H. Vance, and held it up for everyone to see. "I know the farm is currently under considerable financial strain," I announced, every word ringing with devastating clarity. "And I know that Robert is likely facing foreclosure, thanks to his recent string of inexplicable business losses. I want to assure you all that, even in separation, I am a woman of my word." I looked directly at Robert, whose eyes were wide with a desperate confusion. "Robert," I called out, my voice filled with a final, cutting pity. "You paid for that farm with my life, and I paid for it with my savings. And tonight, I'm paying the final price to set myself free." I turned my gaze to Mr. Davies, the loan officer. "Mr. Davies," I addressed him, "my husband's debts are his own, and the farm's mortgage is clearly underwater due to his contracting losses. However, to ensure that Robert Vance can no longer boast about his ill-gotten dream or hold this farm over my head as a final insult, I have one last transaction to make." I signaled to Archibald Sterling, who discreetly nodded to a man standing near the entrance. "The loan on the Vance Homestead is currently held by your institution, totaling $285,000, I stated precisely. "I have just completed a wire transfer from my personal account, Eleanor H. Vance, covering the entire remaining balance of that mortgage, including penalties and fees. The loan is now paid off in full." A collective gasp swept the room. Robert took an involuntary step forward. Shelby's hand flew to her mouth. Mr. Davies, already checking his phone, looked up, his face stunned. "Mrs. Vance, the wire transfer, it's confirmed. The loan, the mortgage is settled." I let the silence hang for a moment, letting the magnitude of the $285,000 payment, my money, my final act, sink in. "But Mrs. Vance," Mr. Davies stammered, "if the loan is paid off, the deed remains with Robert Vance. The farm is his, free and clear of debt." This was the moment of the ultimate moral twist. The moment I had bought not just the farm, but absolute control over Robert's fate. I smiled, a genuine, profound smile that held no warmth, only the cold, sharp edge of finality. "Ah, but Mr. Davies, and all of you, you are forgetting something crucial," I said, holding up the replica deed for the whole room to see. I paid off the loan, yes, but I never bought the farm to own it. I bought it to own his destruction. I then turned, took the beautifully printed deed, walked over to a nearby centerpiece containing a tall, lit pillar candle, and without hesitation, lowered the document into the flame. The deed to Vance Homestead, the centerpiece of 30 years of my life, the object of Robert's deepest desire, the reason for his cruelest betrayal, went up in flames. The smoke curled toward the ceiling, carrying the scent of burning paper and the death of a dream. The debt is paid, Robert. The farm is free and clear, I announced as the paper crumbled into black ash. But you cannot have it. The price you paid, my savings, my trust, my life, was not worth the final reward. I pulled out one last document from my clutch. The formal, official, uncontested divorce petition I had signed that morning. Robert, I said, walking up to him, the ashes of the deed falling from my hands. You wanted to be rid of me so badly that you took my life's work and gave it to her. Now you are free. The divorce papers are served. You have the farm, which is now worth absolutely nothing to you. I looked past him to Shelby, who was standing there, the realization dawning in her eyes. Shelby, I said, my voice dropping to a low, intimate tone that only she and Robert could hear. You fought so hard to save your homestead. Now that it is debt-free, Robert and his business have absolutely no liquidity left. The farm has no operating capital, no contract revenue, and zero chance of surviving the winter. It's now a $3 million liability that will bankrupt him utterly within 6 months, just as I planned. I turned back to Robert, who looked like a hollow shell of a man, his dream, now debt-free, weighing him down like a lead anchor. You can't sell it, because nobody wants a farm with no business plan. You can't run it, because you have no capital left. And you can't borrow against it, because your business is ruined, I concluded. I bought your dream, Robert, and I made sure it became your fatal poison. Enjoy your free farm. I didn't wait for him to respond. I didn't need to. His devastation was complete, a final, unrecoverable ruin. I looked at Clara, who had tears in her eyes, not of sadness, but of fierce, protective pride. I walked toward the exit, my head held high, the ghost of the tired, self-sacrificing Eleanor Vance finally laid to rest. The farm was gone. Robert's career was gone. His relationship with the opportunistic Shelby was clearly fractured by the weight of their new, bankrupt reality. I had my freedom. I had my $300,000 cash. And I had the chilling satisfaction of knowing that the cost of Vance Homestead was finally borne by the one who deserved it most. My life was no longer defined by his dream, but by my own unyielding strength. And that, I knew, was a far more valuable asset than any farm could ever be. The end.